We're live.
What time does the 7 o'clock meeting start?
7 o'clock. Thank you. Welcome to Position Neutrality. Happy Juneteenth. For those of you in Canada and other parts of the world, if you don't know what Juneteenth is, you join a whole lot of Americans that don't either. But it is a uniquely American holiday that celebrates freedom for freedom's sake. And so I thought a bunch of recovery people ought to just join in the celebration of freedom. Fair enough? And for you history buffs, I'm not going to get into it, but it was the final bunch of people liberated as a result of the Emancipation Proclamation were finally notified in June 19th of 1865 of their freedom. So, all right. So, we start every one of these sessions with a prayer, and Wayne has agreed to do that. All right.
Hello, everybody. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your presence. We thank you for the guiding and leading that you give us, Lord. We turn our lives over to you, Lord, and we ask you that you point us in the direction that we should go. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Wayne. Shout out to Bob. Thanks for reaching out this week. Bob is anchor for the Show Others group in Edmonton, Alberta. And anybody we're missing, thanks for joining us. Aaron's back with us tonight, and Eric. Both of them have been world travelers. So those of you that know Aaron and Eric know they're home safe. Thanks for traveling mercies. So what we do at Position of Neutrality is we take a look at the suggested instruction for a step or so a week, directly out of this book, and we use this book in 12-Step Recovery. Why?
It works.
The process described by the authors of this book has been proven to work for addicts of the hopeless variety, addicts to alcohol and other substances, and indeed all kinds of other behavioral disorders can be corrected through this same manner of living. Yes? There's power to change, power to set free. Yeah? So tonight we're going to take a look at the third step. Last week we looked at where and how to find power. Where do we find power? And how do we find it? Searching fearlessly. So logically, now that I have accessed power, I'm going to be empowered to make a decision I've been not able to follow through on in the past, to move into action in order to learn the facts about myself. Yeah? So the instructions for step 3 are found in chapter. Most people that have been to AA meetings probably are familiar with at least the first portion of the chapter entitled How It Works. How many of you have been to AA meetings before? So yeah, most meetings I've ever been to, wherever they were, read some portion of chapter 5 at the beginning of meetings, and even other fellowships have adapted some of it. So anyway, we're going to be looking at that, and what that really is, that portion we read at those meetings, is the wrap-up of steps 1 and 2, leading us to a third step decision. Yeah? So they start out with a promise and a condition. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. So you want to ask yourself, who's the we? The first 100 rarely saw a person fail who what?
Thoroughly followed our path.
Although there was 100, and this is a book about the first several thousand who recovered, one path.
Right.
Interesting, isn't it? Yes. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. So you might want to ask yourself, honest with themselves about what?
Powerless over alcohol and life is unmanageable.
Anybody else got thoughts? There's no real wrong or right answer, right? he's talking about the fundamentals within the decision that he's reaching, right? They talked about two things they need us to be honest about specifically. The doctor said that if we were this person, if we had this alcoholism and we are of the hopeless variety, that we would always be looking for ease and comfort somewhere. And that if we didn't find a way to find it within us, we would find it outside of ourselves. And if we did, it could lead to trouble. Right? Right. And then they told us in the step 2 encounter that they found as soon as they were able to set aside prejudice and be willing to believe, that they found that a new power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction flowed into them. Right. So it's a handy little trick to know for an addict of the hopeless variety that I don't have to go out in the world looking for my ease and comfort. Right? So now it's about living a disciplined life. So when I feel myself being restless, irritable, and discontent in the world, I go inward instead of outward. Starting to make sense? And so the decision's going to lead us into a manner of living that gets me disciplined in those practices. Yeah? Okay. So then it says there are such unfortunates. So how many of you have thought yourself to be such an unfortunate? Yeah, a lot of hands go up with that. How many of you have thought others to be such unfortunates? And the thing is, they are until they're not, because all of us are until we're not. And our job is not to judge, but to witness properly and appropriately. Yes, which is why I'm going to go through the manner of living and the practices and the disciplines, so I'm properly armed with the facts about myself. I'm not equipped to talk to you about you, but I am perfectly fit to talk to you about me once properly armed. Does that make sense? It says there are such unfortunates. They're not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They're naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. No one gets to recovery rigorously honest. It's a lie. There's a manner of living which demands from us that we be honest with ourselves in the coming moments as they come to us. We need to learn to question our thinking, not become our thoughts. Those are things that will come in time, right? We're going to hit a chapter next that's into action, because we act our way into better thinking because we've proven unable to think our way into better acting. So you're still going to have some rough edges even after you've made a decision. You're just going to have grace and protection. Right. Does that make sense? Yes. All right. So their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. So how many of you have met those people with grave emotional and mental disorders? Ricky's met a few. Yeah. How many of you have been here long enough to realize it's you? And those of you that are hearing me and thinking I'm trying to make a joke, no, all of us get here not wanting to be like those people. There's an old Irish proverb, tell me who your friends are, I'll tell you what you are. So, just so you know, we tend to flock with birds of a feather. And sometimes it takes a minute to wake up to what a miracle has been done for us. And so don't quit too soon, right? All right. So our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. Now, how can I get to where I can tell you in a general way what I used to be like?
With a self-examination.
Yeah, I'd have to take a look at not only my impression of what I used to be like, but other people's impression of me about what I used to be like. And then what happened to change all that, why I'm now bearing witness, and what I'm like now. Again, some balance of what I perceive myself to be and how I'm perceived by others, yes? That's very different from what it was like, which we hear a lot of people say. That's simply perspective. What it was like, quite frankly, not to be dismissive, but we don't care. Right. You know, I'll tell you what it was like. I thought only suckers pay rent. And I don't need none of your shit. Just get me a box and a toothless honey, and I'm good. That's what I thought. That's what it was like. What I was like was frightened. I was selfish. I was dishonest. I was full of guilt, shame, and remorse. I didn't think I was deserving of human kindness, much less divine redemption. That's what I was like. Then I met a power through a man who knew a man. And he introduced me to an experience that changed my mind. That's what happened. And now what I'm like now is for many years, I am still a very imperfect man, but I'm a better man that showed up. Yes? All right. So it's a difference in the power of witness, and you learn that by the discipline. Yes? By getting armed with the facts. All right. So if you've decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. So guys, if you're sponsoring people, we got to show them what it is these authors had and see if they're willing to do those things, because if not, they're not ready to take certain steps. Why drag them through the pain of it? And it's okay to ask them that. So where would we find what they were like? Because it's not what I'm like. It's not what you're like. It's what they were like and what they had, right? Okay, so what they had is found on page 25. And if you go to the middle of page 25, it says the great fact is just this and nothing less, that we've had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. Wow, they're sleeping tonight, guys. Normally, when I say God, they say power, because we don't want anyone confused that's had a bad theological or religious experience. We're just focusing you on the power, peace, happiness, and sense of direction, the revelatory nature of this power within us, yes? Yeah. Sensory. Okay, so the central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. So when they witness to the absolute certainty that their Creator has entered in their heart and lives, think about the dynamics of the group they disclosed last week, that half of them were atheists or agnostics declared. The other half were some religious persuasion who thought they were a lost cause. But every one of them has gained access to and believes in this power that's commenced to do this impossible thing through them. And so when they say they're absolutely certain, why do I need to be absolutely certain rather than hopeful?
Because you're going to be taking actions.
You're going to be taking actions. You're going to face challenges. Yes. You're going to have to confront your own thinking and your own belief systems. Yes? You're going to have to question your own judgments. Right? What were you absolutely certain of in addiction?
When I took a drink, I got drunk.
Yeah, I'm not even sure I knew I would get drunk, but I knew I'd feel different. And this is what we're talking about. Certainty is, if I will seek this power, I will feel different. If I will seek this power, I will get through this difficult moment. Without that kind of certainty, I will not be able to face life completely exposed in time. Does it make sense? That's just talking about me, but I've been doing this a while, and I'll tell you, sometimes life shows up, and it's a good thing I don't go outward looking for comfort in the same way I once did. All right, so he has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. So now that's what we have. Are you okay with that, or are you willing to go to? Okay. So if that's what you want, that kind of certainty, so that you can move forward with your life and become that person you always wanted to be, then you're ready to take certain steps. So there is a bit of an interview process before we drag them through the steps, isn't there? Okay. Then it goes on to tell us at some of these we balked. So when they freak out about an inventory, and they're not freaking out about the inventory, they're freaking out about having to tell somebody else what they found in the inventory. Or they don't know how to do the inventory, because why the hell would you? If you've never done it before, why would you know how? Or you're already looking at step 8, made a list of all the people we've harmed, and you're thinking, holy shit, I can't make amends to all those people. Right? So stay in the step you're in. You've been empowered. Now you're going to make a decision. You're going to get some more experiences, and then we're going to walk you through this first step of action, which will be an inventory. Does that make sense? All right. So we thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. That's why you guys working with somebody, sometimes you have a real powerful third step, and they're going to jump right into a 4th step with you, and they ghost you. Because they thought they were ready. They thought, maybe I can find another way. Right? I mean, I'm telling you about it right here, what happens. Okay. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Why would I want that for them? Because it's a tedious process, just like they warned us. If you don't do this, you're probably going to return to what brought you here. Exactly. And if not, it might even be worse. Yes. And if, at a minimum, you're going to miss out on the freedom that you could have today. Does it make sense? Yes. All right, so some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. Guys, you don't have to worry about whether you've let go absolutely. Start moving in the actions, and as it demanded of you, you'll let go. Focus on others' needs and work for them, and the letting go will take care of itself. Does that make sense? All right, so remember that we deal with alcohol. Cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it's too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. So where are we going looking? And how are we going looking? Sometimes we have to search fearlessly. So the whole matter of living is starting to make sense. The whole progression of things, yes? And I've already started with a prayer. I haven't even learned the 3rd step prayer yet. And here's step 2 prayer. Now that I'm properly informed on where I'm going looking. Yes? So then it says half measures availed us nothing. Why'd they warn us about that?
Because we tried.
It was important enough to them that they employed enough half measures they thought they should write it down. Right? And how many of you have employed half measures and then thought you were getting, some semblance of relief and then found out no? So most of us have tried because we'll settle. Yeah. So we stood at the turning point. We ask his protection and care with complete abandon. They're telling you about somebody ready for the 3rd step actions, right? The prayer and then the action that immediately follows. And you'll know that as you're sponsoring them, you'll feel that on them. So here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. I called to your attention what's suggested as a program of recovery, and it has nothing to do with meetings. I'm not saying abandon your meetings or your fellowship. I'm saying that's not the program of recovery. Right? So I'm not going to read through all the steps because you all can do that yourself, but I am going to take you to page 60 where it says, after reading the steps, many of us exclaimed, what an order, I can't with it. Guys, they're talking about a deep emotional and mental block that everyone who sees those things on the wall goes through, even when their proper power is demonstrated through you. So we don't want to make light of it. We want to follow the author's lead. Do not be discouraged. This is my opportunity to tell them how human I am. Look, I can feel you freaking. Don't. Everything about you, you probably already know. You're just afraid it'll change my view of you when I know. It won't. Does that make sense? Okay, do not be discouraged. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We're not saints. The point is that we're willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. The whole point in my witness to you, what I was like, what happened, what I'm like now. I'm endeavoring to be uniquely useful to you and genuinely helpful to you, and that has changed behavior from the likes of me. I have no expectation of you doing anything for me now or ever, but I hope you will think of your brother and sister once we get through the process, or you will suffer if you don't employ this power. Does it make sense? So our description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, and our personal adventures before and after make clear three pertinent ideas. A, that we were alcoholic and could not manage our own lives. Notice how they combined the step 1 and 2 information, right? My alcoholism demands that I quit managing my life chemically, which is what I had been doing. Yes? All right, so that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. That's a hard one for us. And remember, we are a human power, and all our loved ones are human powers, and all the human institutions and principles are human power. They're constructs, and they become false idols for those of you who read that other book. If you're relying too heavily on worldly things, you will be let down. Any of you hear about that thing that happened in 2019, 2020, a little worldwide pandemic, where we learned not to trust any governmental system anywhere in the world? We had idolized them. We were all idolaters. And it's been shown to us that that is not where our hope comes from. Does that make sense? That wasn't a political statement, folks. I'll guarantee you there's a lot of people that may think so, but nope. I just watched this power upset the tables and hand to the poor a whole bunch of assets they'd have never had access to, because nobody knew how to stop what had happened when everyone was shutting everything else down. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, well, you just don't know enough about my story. But anyway, that God could and would if he were sought. That's what you really need to be convinced of more than anything else, is this power you've encountered as witnessed by whoever's helping me walk this manner of living out, that even if I don't believe, that one with me is helping my unbelief. And he's going to walk me into this. Yes? Okay. So being convinced, we're at step 3. So before I even leave 2, they've asked me, are you real? You understand? They've had the manner of living explained to them. That's why the steps are in front of that. That's what this is. You got questions about 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We'll explain it to you. Whatever it takes. You cannot move into a conscious relationship without examining it with your logical senses and moving into it consciously. You're entitled to know. And if the person trying to take you doesn't know, find someone who can. The whole argument was made by Bill Wilson. It's more logical to believe than not to believe based on his experience. And he detailed the experience right here. All right, so being convinced, we're at step 3, which is that we decided to turn our will and our life over to God as we understood him. So don't get into the chorus, this is a God of my understanding. That's not what they said. They told you clearly they understood this power to be sensory, an experience, clean wind of a mountaintop blowing through and through. The understanding they had was this power flowing through them that was revelatory and liberating and informative and inspirational. Does that make sense? All sensory attributes that I need in order to get a foundation for my new life. And then it says, turn our will and our life. So my will is my wishes, my thoughts. My life, I've heard it explained as actions, but it's more personal than that. It's your breath. Yes. There's another book that says, I can only do what I see the Father doing. I can only say what I hear the Father saying. The breath of life is breathed into us for a purpose. So it's a serious decision. Treat it as such, yes? All right. So then what do we mean by that, and what do we do now that we've just got everybody going, whew. She cries every time. All right, so the first requirement is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. So, are you convinced? Yes. Based on what? Whose?
Mine and yours.
Yeah, as you grow, that's the truth, right? Sean's telling you from a guy's experience that sponsored many men now. Many of you have sponsored many men and women and what have you. And so now we've got combined experience. But in the beginning, I'm just talking about my experience. And they said any life. So I've got to let go of all my ideas that I know so much about you that I should share my opinion rather than just finding out the truth about me and sharing my experience. Right? So I got to quit being affected by what other humans are doing. All right. So on that basis, we're almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. So how many of you had that experience? Most people try to live by self-propulsion. I call your attention to the words they use. The authors use the words they mean the words they say. If they wanted to talk about an alcoholic, they would say alcoholic. But they said people. Okay? So each person is like an actor who wants to run the whole show, is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest, and self-sacrificing.
Thank you.
So Sean and Eric are glad you recognize their attributes. And here's the thing. We often see ourselves in that lens, or we see others in that lens. And so we want to remember these are human traits. So let's go a little further. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. How many of you, be honest with yourself, see yourself more easily in one category than the other? Okay, so if you're seeing yourself mean and egotistical and selfish, let yourself off the hook. This is the condemnation's done. As of this day, Freedom Day, no more condemnation. Right? You've been bought at a price. So what I want you to understand is don't hold other humans to standards you cannot yourself meet, but don't hold yourself to standards that no human can meet. Does it make sense? That's why we need power. And sometimes we're teaching lessons, right? So, but as with most humans, he's more likely to have varied traits. And I may misperceive too. How many of you had a sponsor that you thought walked on water and then one day you found out they were human? Oh, what a disappointment. And they never represented themselves as anything but human, right? So, and I don't always know that I'm even judging fairly. This is why I should never judge, right? All right, so what usually happens? She knew the answers. She said the show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself more. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious as the case may be, and still the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he's sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying.
Yes.
So here's the question. When they ask a question, they usually mark them with a question mark. And it's an opportunity for you to go inward. Because eyesight without insight is spiritual blindness. So, what is his basic trouble?
Selfishness and self-centered.
Yes.
Some of us that are the beneficiaries of an inventory know what some of those manifestations of self are. And we know that fear drives it. And so we remind ourselves who we are and whose we are, and we reset, yes?
Yes.
So is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind?
Yeah.
How many of you have been mad at somebody who you did an act of kindness for? Okay. Yeah. So we often, it's very common to be working with someone and pretending it's selfless and then get angry because they didn't meet our expectation, right? So it was not selflessness, it was transactional. And that, again, we're not condemning, we're learning that about the way we think and how we cause our own suffering, yes?
Who are you trying to manipulate?
Right.
So is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of the world if only he manages well?
Yeah.
How many of you didn't know that was a delusion? Probably all of us, right? Because we read books that tell us how to make it happen and do, all the, and the reality is there's a lot of things that have to align for things to go certain ways. And you can plan. No one say don't plan, but also plan for plans to change. Right? All right. So is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? So how many of you are running around pretending you were in charge and someone found out you weren't in charge? In fact, they thought they were in charge. How many of you found the one that really was in charge? Anyway, the point is we got that going on as humans, don't we? Yeah. So, and do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show?
Yeah.
So now I'm starting to find a way, if I can get off the hook myself, I can let them off the hook. I can realize that people aren't intentionally harming me a high percentage of the time. They're probably just running around sleep like I am. And they're not thinking of me, they're thinking of them. Right?
Yeah.
So is he not in his best moments a producer of confusion rather than harmony? You ever met the guy that, come on, all you guys have been around a while. You've had the new guy come in. He's all gung-ho, and everybody really appreciates his enthusiasm. But you would think the whole fellowship of AA has been waiting for this guy to arrive. I had a guy ask me that. Joe, are you under the impression we were waiting for you? That's why I know that it is an experience. And so, love and tolerance is all I can say. Anyway, our actor is self-centered, egocentric, as people like to call it nowadays. He's like the retired businessman who lolls in the Florida sunshine in the winter, complaining of the sad state of the nation. The minister who sighs over the sins of the 20th century. Politicians and reformers who are sure all would be utopia if the rest of the world would only behave. The outlaw safecracker who thinks society has wronged him. And the alcoholic who has lost all and is locked up. Whatever our protestations, are not most of us concerned with ourselves, our resentments, or our self-pity. So they want you to ask yourself that question, because it really doesn't matter why I'm living in grievance, because it can come from any number of forms. It could come from some real life mistreatments. It could come from all kinds of misjudgments. But the point is, wouldn't it be better if I'm bound up in that stuff to examine it and see which ones are worth dying for? Because that's what I'm going to embark on, learning the facts about myself. Right? I like to talk about the Eagles song. I know a lot of people don't like the Eagles, but when you're old like me, we have fond memories of the Eagles. And one song lyric went, "So oftentimes it happens that we live our lives in chains and we never even know we hold the key." Guys, if you're in recovery and denying yourself a step experience, you're living your life in chains needlessly, and you've been led to the chain breaker. Does that make sense? Okay, so selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. So we're going to start there. The only perspective I have, mine. Yes? Because until I start looking at others and trying to help them through their stuff, my perspective is always mine. Yeah. Okay, so driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us seemingly without provocation, but we invariably find that at some time in the past, we've made decisions based on self, which later placed us in a position to be hurt. Cautionary tale here. If you're brand new to the process, getting ready to do your first inventory, no one is suggesting that people that harmed you as a child or even as an adult, that you had any part in that hurt. What we are suggesting is if you're dying of it years later, you might want to reconsider its importance in light of the fact that you've been brought through it. And if you walk out...
Unforgiveness is a character.
And unforgiveness is a poison, right? It taints our world. So the reality is I owe a massive debt to all of humanity and the Creator. for what has been forgiven of me. And who am I to hold somebody else to some standard because of their interaction with me, who may or may not have been, you know, I might not have been completely straight in all things either, right? So the point is, give yourself some time, but never say never. Get it on that list for, I'm willing to grow, yeah? So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. So now I told you, most humans, they're just regular examples of self-will run riot. That's why I got to get rid of my human condition, because I've discovered I'm a human with an alcoholic condition. And I'm not just a regular example of self-will run riot. I'm an extreme example, and I don't think so. So what are my odds? I'm an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. Without a change that I cannot bring about, I am doomed to an ugly death. Yep. Okay. So it says, above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. See why they make the distinction? The rest of the world's probably not going to conform to my new set of rules. This book isn't written for you to judge how other people should behave. This book is written so that you have access to power if you'll perform the disciplines to the best of your willingness as you grow spiritually. It won't bother you so much how the world is. Make sense? So we muster, it kills us, and God makes that possible. Notice how they said that. If he makes it possible, does that mean it's a given? No, I'm still going to have to walk in the calling I've been given, right? You understand? I hear people all the time, I choose sobriety. Great. Why did you wait till you got to AA to choose it? Because it is my belief, if you got here, you were chosen. And the chosen do not choose. We just face an alternative. Go on to the bitter end, blotting out our miserable existence the best we can, or accept spiritual help. And this we do because we ain't got any other options. And then once empowered, this power has a way, just like the cocaine did, just like the alcohol did. You know how once you took one, you didn't have to be convinced to take two? This power will do that for you too. Once you've taken one, you won't have to be convinced to take two. Does that make sense? So, and there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Think about that. That's a very scientific. If you're aware of self, you're not rid of self. No matter how many selfies you take of yourself being selfless, you're there. You're still there. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore, but we could not live up to them even though we would have liked to. So how many of you would have liked to behave better but just kept falling short? Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. How many of you tried making decisions and couldn't keep decisions? How many of you just got so uncomfortable within yourself that you just could not stop the attacks? Remember, they told you this power can philosophically comfort us by their witness, which is the power I need. If this power is going to let me live, then I need to be philosophically comforted as I grow. Does it make sense? So this is the how and the why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. So how and why? Next, we decided that hereinafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. So what does a director do?
He points.
Remember, they told you power, peace, happiness, sense of direction flowed into them. A director directs. And now you're getting your guidance from within instead of from the world. Some of you students of that other book, Faith Without Works is Dead, and also Live by Faith, Not by Sight. We're trying to open your internal eyes through this discipline. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So he's the principal, we're his agents. What's the principal do and what's the relationship to the agents? Those agents move in that principal's authority. You want to walk in power? The principal of all principles wants you as his agent, and you walk in his authority in his name. There's power in that name. His agents, he's the father and we're his children. Who you are and whose you are. If you know that, you cannot be defeated because he cannot be defeated. Does it make sense? Most good ideas are simple. Why do we want to make it complex? Oh, no, that's not what that says. No, that's what it says. Told us just exactly who he is and who you are to him. And this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. So they give it to us as a concept, and we walk it into a certainty. Does that make sense? And the neat thing is you get to walk in that power and bring about healings and radical rearrangements for others. Not because of what you did, but because of what he did. So when we sincerely took such a position, all sorts of remarkable things followed. What are they talking about?
Changes in our life.
The blind see, the lame walk, the captives are set free. I crawled out of this grave. It's free to be me. Happy Juneteenth. Right? Took a while. We had a new employer. Who do I work for now?
God's power.
Yeah, I work for power, right?
Yeah.
Being all powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. That's a promise that's so powerful. I don't know why more people don't claim that. Your needs are already met. Quit worrying about it. Just walk it out. And I now know why I need to grow in conscious contact, because that's the only way I can keep close to him from my workplace to my home. Right? So, established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. Think about your life in active addiction, and shortly thereafter, maybe you just wanted to stop tearing yourself up, or you wanted to stop tearing your family down, or you just wanted some consequences to go away. Maybe you've walked it out a little bit and you've received so much more. My little plans and designs on those days were just nothing compared to, yes? So, and they said that, our little plans. And they were only 4 years or so in, most of these people writing this book, right? Think about what you guys got that are out here walking 15, 20, I mean, there's so much more than greater works than these you'll do. Okay, so more and more we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. In order to contribute to life, you have to know you have something to give. How many of you lived a life where you really didn't know what you had to give to anyone? Maybe you were even afraid to take your first person through the steps because, I don't want to hurt them. You've been uniquely prepared to carry out these works placed before you. And you've got to walk it out. And you're going to need power greater than you to do it, because you're not there to judge them or give advice. You're there to share experience and call their attention to the one who's bringing them in, right? Because you'll feel them. All right, so then it says, as we felt new power flow in. It's kind of a promise, isn't it?
Yeah.
As we enjoyed peace of mind. How many of you have enjoyed peace of mind, but it's not something that's familiar to you? How many have been sober a while and have learned that if you don't stay in discipline, that stuff goes away and you start trying to control, right? Control is what we're addicted to. The substances and things like that, those are just symptoms of my control addiction. So So as we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully. How many thought your life was over? I've done so much harm, never, nothing. This is so awful, never. How many of you would have been wrong? Yeah. Anyone that sticks will tell you that's how they thought, and that's not how I know today. Okay, as we became conscious of his presence, look at what they're talking about there. You're going to grow in awareness of being aware of a power in you that is not of you. You'll still think like you, but act like him. And if you'll continue to choose kinder action, even when you're having unkind thoughts, you'll continue to grow. Does it make sense? I told a story from here one time. I think we were still back at the center, but about going to, because the story came up again this week, going up to Camp Verde or someplace, see my father, and Denise needed to use the restroom, but she neglected to tell me that in Black Canyon City. She waited until we were at the top of the hill going past the rest area, and I looked at her and said, we don't really need to go to the rest area, right? We're at Cordis in just a few miles. And she had that look, not if you want to ride in this car all the way to. So I'm annoyed that I got to turn around. You know, you guys don't know the road. You got to turn around and go back to this rest area because it's on the other side of the highway. So we go there, let her out. She runs into the potty, and I fix my eyes on a trailer in the parking lot that really is downtrodden, terrible. The generator laying outside, it says just married on the side. And I thought it was so hilarious, I thought I'd take a picture of it and send it to my friends. Hey, this looks like a New Freedom executive.
Whoa.
In fact, I did, and I still have it on my phone. But then this fellow comes walking up to me from there and started crying and telling me about his new wife, and he couldn't feed his dog, and his truck was broken down, and he didn't know what he was going to do. And the Holy Spirit stopped me from hearing what he was saying and just convicted me in the spot. The next time I get your attention, don't judge. So I gave him all the help I had, and I went on my way humbled. And you need to understand, I would never have been there had I not got sent there. And I was annoyed to be sent there. And I was shameful in my thoughts and behaviors. And the grace of this power was only to admonish so I could see the miracle, not only him meeting the need for another human being, but using a wretch like me to do it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Some of you are feeling that because it's hot. Okay, so as we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter, we are reborn. Being reborn is not just a theory, guys. It's you know, my friend Chaplain Lee always says, you always got to be ready to preach, you always got to be ready to pray, and you always got to be ready to die. That only happens when you know who you are and whose you are. So we're now at step 3. So I know, isn't that crazy? These guys talk and yammer, and that old guy talks on that thing. But we're hoping that if you're new to this, you see when we are tedious about unpacking it, there's a lot here. That's why you might want to humble yourself and ask someone to help you. No one can read this book on their own because it describes a sensory experience that needs to be called to your attention. So many of us said to our Maker as we understood him, so now I got a different understanding by this point, don't I? Okay, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Call your attention to the fact that there is no amen there. I know you've seen one on the card at the AA hall that has one there. Remember, some drunk did that. There's a reason that it's not there. I'm just asking for power to enter into a personal relationship. There's no agreement needed. By the time I come out of that inventory, I will have the agreement of me and the Holy Spirit and whomever I told the story to. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So we thought, well, before taking this step, making sure that we were ready. So what they want me to be at this point is contemplative.
Yeah.
And remember, we haven't taken anything step at all. We just had an encounter. We found ourselves sitting in a room with a bunch of crazy people. Someone said, get a sponsor. I got a freaking sponsor. This guy, if I don't pay attention, I think I've died and gone to hell. He won't let me out of his car. That we could at last abandon ourselves utterly to him. And that's a capital H.
Yeah.
Right? So this power we've discovered, I'm going to abandon myself to that power because I'd already had the experience of abandoning myself to worldly powers. And I know what that wrought. All right, so then it gives us some caution. We found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. So sometimes we're uncomfortable with prayer, so we want someone to do it with us so we don't feel weird. It's the reality of the moment, especially if half of them are atheists or agnostics in the beginning. To a person, this is what they did, though. Don't buy that crap. That ain't what they did. They didn't get in this book. They didn't do it. And then it says, but it's better to meet God alone than with one who might misunderstand. So no one's telling you if you did it with someone who knew what it was you were trying to grow into, that you did it wrong. You did not. But what we do not want to do is dampen the effect. So the wording was, of course, quite optional so long as we express the idea, voicing it without reservation. So I always tell people, if you don't speak in King James language, write your own prayer. But if you want to voice the idea, you better understand or have someone explain to you what the idea is. Right? Relieve me of the bondage of self. So these manifestations of self got in the way of the man I wanted to be because driven by fear, I acted like something I wasn't.
Right.
Yes?
Yeah.
And so I need to be relieved of that bondage so I'm okay to be who I am and then grow into who I can be. Yes? And then it says, take away my difficulties that they may bear witness. So it's not about what I say, it's about what he pulls off of me that is demonstrable, that others can see. Keep doing the work till other people see the change in you. Then give the credit properly to the power it is that did it.
Right.
His love, his power, his way of life. Right? I didn't invent this way of life. I definitely needed his power. And if I had any idea of love prior, I was completely deluded on its application.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So write your own prayer. Have someone help you if you need to, but it should mean something to you because God doesn't care about prayers you don't care about. Okay? So voicing it without reservation. Why do I need to voice it without reservation? Yeah, the author said, we learned we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were. This is the first step in recovery. So ain't nothing happening. I don't care what the wall says. I don't know how many times you admitted until you fully conceded to you, the innermost man.
Yeah.
Nothing was happening. Make sense?
Yep.
And then it says, this was only a beginning. It's not enough to fully concede. Now I got to get up and follow.
Yeah.
And I will give you a little hint. Followers of him are inevitably leaders of men.
Woo, yes.
Just know that. So this was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once. Now they're completely unabashedly telling you, this is a sensory washing. You will feel it. And even if you don't, I was so dead in the detox this man met me in, and shortly thereafter, he called to my attention the washing he felt. I mean, he was crying. This was an old ex-con from Texas. probably not in the habit of crying.
Right.
And he watched me awaken before his eyes through this process and called to my attention. And that was enough for me to believe it could happen for me, so much so that I went through the rest of the steps in that day, was making amends that night, and was working with people the following week.
Yes. Yes. Amen.
Yeah, I mean, quick. Yeah. So there is an effect that comes at once. Your circumstances do not change at once, but our internals change at once, and then we walk it out. Does that make sense? Let's see, where did I sometimes, I was going to give you one more example of that, and I have just enough time. A fellow I met at a meeting down at the old Mid-City AA Hall had been bouncing in and out of meetings for about 10 years. And I gave a talk, and he asked me if I would take him through his steps. So I sat down with him right there out in the parking lot of that old AA hall, and I took him through a 1 and a 2 and left him on the 3rd step decision and said, go home, think about it, write a prayer, say a prayer, call me later tonight, tell me what you've decided. And either way, it's cool, I'll see you around, right? And so he called me about 9:30 that night, and he says, well, I said that prayer, I didn't feel nothing. But my inventory's done, and I'd like to discuss it with you tomorrow. So those of you that are feeling that, you understand what I then told him. I said, some people would think and would say that if you've been in AA for 10 years, fearing a 4th step, and you produced one in the last few hours, most of us would agree that was an effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's all I got. See you next week.
Oh.
Get it?